Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is how Israel's reputation suffered because of October 7th. Israel suffered a serious blow to its international standing as a direct result of the brutal massacre and hostage-taking of her citizenry at the hands of Hamas, the terrorist organization, on October 7th, 2023. The image of Israel plummeted in the eyes of the Western world, especially among youth and in academic circles. The Jewish reputation of the Jewish state was destroyed, devoured by Jew haters, no longer fearful of expressing their long-hidden disdain for Jews and for Israel. Israel's fall from grace has little to do with the country's messaging, nothing to do with the legal right to defend the country and her citizens, nothing to do with how, why, and what responsive decisions that Israel made and the actions that were taken. The fact is, it has little to do with Israel at all. The destruction of Israel's reputation is due to a well-greased, very well-organized, and very, very well-funded pro-Hamas media propaganda operation. Virulent haters of Israel on the political left, among them Democratic Socialists of America and other Hamas supporters like Students for Justice in Palestine, and many that were backed actually by Qatar and other deep pockets, were lying in wait. They had an entire anti-Israel, anti-Jewish strategy prepared and ready to drop at any moment's notice, chomping at the bit. They were literally waiting for the perfect opportunity to launch their propaganda attack against Israel, especially on campuses across the United States and then in Europe. That moment, that perfect opportunity arrived on October 7th. Without missing a beat, they were able to amalgamate the voices of frustrated anti-Western students, many just looking for a fun anti-establishment cause. Any cause would have done. This one fell in their proverbial laps. The strategy was to turn the entire October 7th massacre into a non-issue, or to classify it as a natural response to colonial oppression. In other words, the massacre was justified. It was a natural response to Israel's oppressive regime and the West's aggressive colonialism. The narrative was so simple and so monodimensional. Western Jews confiscated the natural lands of the Palestinians. Palestinians come Hamas, fought back. Israel got what it deserved, they said. According to their well-honed narrative, Israel was to blame. As preposterous as it sounds to thinking minds, Israel was to blame for the October 7th, 2025 massacre of their own men, women, and children. Israel was to blame for the rapes and for the burning alive of children thrown into ovens. Israel had the murder of 2,500 innocent people and hostage-taking of live and already murdered Israelis coming. This disenfranchised, bored, hateful, and ignorant followers saw the light and understood that Israel and the United States were oppressing the Palestinians. In their now wide-open eyes, there was no other option for Hamas other than to attempt to overthrow their oppression, and by any means necessary, even violent, brutal murder. That is why Israel was to blame. That is why Israel's response could not be tolerated. It was Israel that needed to be vilified, not the villains themselves. That's strange. This thesis, supporting Hamas, became the rallying cry across the United States, Canada, and European campuses. It spilled out onto the streets and intersections of major cities. Lovers of Israel were now in the crosshairs. Jews and Jewish institutions, like Jews and Jewish students, and the protectors were branded murderers and defenders of murderers. Were it not so horrific, the irony would be comical. The success of this pro-Hamas strategy blindsided and gut-wrenched Israel, just like the massacre did. Neither Israeli nor worldwide Jewish leaders realized how organized these groups, highlighted by Students for Justice in Palestine, were. Their playbook was complete, with actions, strategies, talking points, speeches, access to materials and equipment, and even Amazon systems for delivering to leaders in the field. That's why all the banners, the posters, the tents, the speeches were almost identical. Israel, lovers of Israel, Jews, lovers of Jews, tried to respond, but it was an uphill and losing battle. The flood of fake videos and hyper-exaggerated numbers, especially of female and children, the casualties, were so convincing that it made it almost impossible for the truth to be heard. Now, over 2 years later, Israel needs to set up and retell her story. The real Israel, the beautiful Israel, the democratic Israel. The world needs to learn anew the wondrous miracles of Israel in science, education, arts, and yes, even in military capabilities. The world needs to be reminded that Israel is the startup nation, the miracle on the Mediterranean. And, if done honestly, with both sympathy and empathy, Israel will succeed. That means that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu needs to step down or be voted out. He has been an exceptional Prime Minister and the longest serving Prime Minister in Israel's history, even longer than Israel's first Prime Minister, David Ben-Gurion. In a stable democracy, no single leader is irreplaceable. Coming up next, Points of View. First up is a column from Ynet. It's penned by Ari Heistein, published on November 27, 2025. It's entitled, Why the Houthis Stopped Shooting for Now. Subtitled analysis, although the Houthis claim they paused attacks because of the Hamas-Israel ceasefire and maintain the ideology aimed at Israel's destruction, their real motivation was the growing military and economic pressure on their regime. This is how Heistein begins. Deterring the Houthis, an organization that combines advanced weaponry, extremist ideology, and a base of operations in a failed state, was never going to be simple. But this challenge was often exaggerated, leading some to conclude that the group was immune to pressure. Yet today, there is reason to believe that the radical movement that seized Sana'a more than a decade ago has, at least some extent, been deterred. Deterrence is the ability of one actor to prevent another from taking a specific action by shaping that actor's assessment of costs and benefits. Deterrence can be achieved in two primary ways: by convincing the adversary that the response will impose significant costs, which is deterrence by punishment, or persuading the adversary that its intended actions will yield limited results, which is deterrence by denial. Heistein explains that it is nearly impossible to calculate deterrence. He writes, assessing deterrence is notoriously difficult because it measures the changes of internal calculations of a threat actor, and because few outside the organization's leadership have access to those calculations. Its effects are rarely possible to reliably measure. The UK Ministry of Defence acknowledges this challenge in its report Deterrence, the Defence Contribution. Measuring the effect of deterrence empirically has proven elusive since deterrence was first codified. Aside from the difficulty of proving a negative, there are so many variable factors in deterrence. It is impossible to say that deterrence alone has caused an adversary to avoid a course of action. And Heistein actually recognizes that and articulates it very clearly. He now tells us just how wrong Israel was in assessing deterrence, both with the Houthis and with Hamas. Israel's assessment, he writes, that Hamas was deterred days before the Al-Aqsa flood attack on October 7, 2023, is a recent and tragic example of misjudging deterrence. That failure stemmed from multiple factors, including Hamas's deliberate deception and Israeli intelligence community's entrenched conception of Hamas, which led it to overlook clear indicators that the group's intentions. In response, some experts now argue that Israel should place less emphasis on deterrence, instead focus on targeting threat actors solely based on the risks posed by their capabilities. Israel made some big mistakes with regard to Houthis, and Heistein writes this very clearly. He writes, in Abdul Malik al-Houthi's words in October 2023, These strikes were intended to show the Yemeni people are ready to do everything they can to perform the sacred duty of standing with the Palestinian people. The Houthis continued this campaign despite significant Israeli and international efforts to discourage the attacks and blunt their impact. Their persistence earned them the unofficial title of the last man standing. Heistein now explains how the Houthis were saying one thing but doing the opposite. He continues, this analysis suggests that the Houthis have not abandoned their aim at destroying Israel and retain the capability to continue to launching missiles and drone attacks. Instead, the substantial costs they absorbed and the limited gains they achieved pushed them to postpone the conflict, with Israel-Hamas ceasefire providing a convenient off-ramp. Despite their radical ideology, advanced weapons, and little to lose, the Houthis proved vulnerable both to pressure that threatened their vital interests, which is deterrence by punishment, and to their own limited ability to inflict meaningful damage, which is deterrence by denial. Had their attacks proved more successful, and the response to them had been more muted, it seems plausible, even likely, that the Houthi attacks on Israel would have continued even after the Israeli-Hamas ceasefire was declared. Heistein now concludes, explaining that the Houthis, like Hamas, pose serious threats to Israel, and they need to be evaluated and acted upon. He writes, yet as long as the Houthi regime remains in power, the threat to renewed attacks persists and could materialize when the moment of opportunity arises. For now, the group may be content to focus on enhancing its capabilities in preparation for the next round. Abdul Malik al-Houthi has claimed, or it may pursue alternative ways to target Israel or the Jewish people that are more difficult to attribute and respond to. But because deterrence exists primarily in the minds of decision makers, it can evaporate as quickly as a leader abruptly changes his mind. Sana's decisions to pull back from a conflict with Israel, even though the issue is central to its ideology, deserves close examination. Understanding the group's calculation can enhance efforts to dissuade future attacks and identify early indicators that deterrence is eroding. Next up is another column from Ynet. It's authored by Ron Ben-Ishai, published on November 29, 2025. It's entitled, U.S. New Gaza Initiative Seeks to Move 2 Million Palestinians and Strip Hamas of Control. Subtitled, commentary, along the Morad corridor, large piles of food supplies lie abandoned, shattering Hamas's starvation narrative. The IDF wants to break more myths as a U.S.-backed new Gaza pilot in Rafah moves slowly forward. This is how Ron Ben-Ishai begins. The Morad corridor separates Khan Yunis area to the north from the Rafah area to the south. It is a dusty dirt road that begins at the border between Gaza and the southern Israeli communities and runs all the way to the Muwasi area, which is under Hamas control and where a large part of the Gaza population is concentrated. Today, this road leads west only up to the yellow line that separates Hamas from the IDF. As we drove along it, the Humvees kicked up dust, and the earthen berms on both sides of the road, meant to protect those traveling from sniper fire and anti-tank missiles, hid the waves of destruction on either side. But what surprised me most as we traveled there were piles of white sacks and cardboard cartons scattered along the entire route. A senior officer in the sector who saw me looking and wondering explained that there were sacks of flour and food packages that had fallen off trucks loaded at the Keren Shalom cargo crossing to be brought in as humanitarian aid for civilians in Gaza. Ben-Ishai continues his description of food, saying that piles and piles of food were there. Deeper we went into Gaza, the larger the amounts of food were thrown along the sides of the road became. In my estimate, there were dozens, perhaps even hundreds of tons of flour sacks and cartons containing mostly canned foods. All of them were intact and ready to eat. The peak came when we passed the trailer truck abandoned with this load in the middle of the road, and the bulldozers had to clear it. after it overturned in order to allow traffic on the route. In the second stage, the new Gaza plan, civilians now living in tin shacks and temporary plastic tents in the Mawasi area will be invited to move into temporary neighborhoods built for them, financed by donor states and the United Nations. Housing there will be in caravans and tents arranged in well-planned compounds. No less important, they will have water, electricity, sewage, infrastructure, as well as hospitals, clinics, educational institutions, and mosques. Ram Ben Ishai concludes, writing that plans are in the works to start phase 2. Trump's phase 2, he writes. The IDF and Shin Bet have already begun planning these inspection points, which would allow residents of New Gaza to live free from Hamas intimidation and receive humanitarian aid at no cost directly from international organizations. The GHF, which operated under Israeli sponsorship and funding, has also ceased operations at the mediator's demand. In conversations on the ground with IDF commanders, the other security officials, one repeatedly hears the claim that Hamas has essentially been defeated militarily, and that Trump's 20-point plan is in fact a rescue for it because it allows its people to leave Gaza alive without weapons. The question is how long this will take and whether Israel and the Israeli public will have the patience to bear the burden until a new heavy American machine begins operating in the field. From tours of Gaza in recent days, the impression is that this will not happen anytime soon. Thank you, Ram Ben Ishai, for an excellent column with spectacular insight. This was actually 2 excellent columns today. Coming up, commentary through cartoons, where pictures tell the story. I want to show you 4 cartoons and 1 meme today. The first cartoon is of President Trump speaking and holding bloody hands of the Saudi prince. The prince is standing on the trampled body of journalist Khashoggi. Their hands are dripping with blood. Trump says, "I respect your right to pursue your own customs, beliefs, and transactions." The Crown Prince says, "Thank you for being so open-minded." This is classic. It seems very clear that the United States is looking the other way when it comes to Saudi Arabia. Next up is a cartoon of 2 panels. In the first panel, Trump is in the UK at a state dinner. He says, "Nobody has ever gotten 2 of these except me, which is a huge accomplishment," he says. The second panel has Bibi and Trump looking in at Europe and the United Nations recognizing Palestinian statehood. Trump tells Bibi, "Who cares, Bibi? It's all just meaningless symbolism." Next up is groups of members of the press looking at a dead member of the press on the ground. The caption reads, "When exposing a crime is treated like committing a crime." What is consistently left out here is that these journalists who were killed are almost always directly connected to Hamas. This next cartoon is exactly the same style. It's a genre. Bibi is broadcasting the news. The headline reads, "Journalists killed." And he says, "That's the way it is in Gaza." A play on famous Walter Cronkite's sign-off line, "And that's the way it is." Finally, a meme, which is a joke about boycotting Israel, boycotting the Palestinians. The meme reads, "I'd like to boycott Palestinian products, but their only invention is their history." That's funny. In a moment, more of my own perspective and a few predictions. Beijing and Moscow conducted a 3rd anti-missile exercise on Russian territory, the Chinese Foreign Ministry announced. The ministry added that the drills were not directed at any third party or in response to recent international events. Don't believe anything that they're telling us. This is certainly a response, and it's about missile defenses. President Isaac Herzog met with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz at the president's residence in Jerusalem. Herzog recalled the long-standing relations between the countries and noted that seeing Arrow 3 missiles installed in Germany moving and important. The Chancellor mentioned that this was his first visit to Israel since his appointment and addressed Germany's partial arms embargo on Israel during the war. The actions of the military and the government put us in a dilemma. We had to respond, but rest assured we are still by your side. An Israeli official addressed the ceasefire with Hamas, saying that U.S. President Donald Trump, quote, wants to declare a transition to the second phase of the agreement before the end of the year. Israel is clarifying to the United States that this contradicts the agreement, which requires Hamas to return all hostages before moving to the next phase. Meanwhile, mediating countries are pressuring Hamas and Islamic Jihad to locate the last deceased hostage held in Gaza, Staff Sergeant Ram Guili. But Israel fears Trump may surprise everyone and announce the transition even before Guili's return home to Israel. Following up on this very note, the family of kidnapped fallen soldier Staff Sergeant Ron Guili stated that they are demanding Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and U.S. President Donald Trump pressure Hamas and Islamic Jihad to bring Ronnie home immediately. The family said that it is impossible to move to the second phase of the deal without Ronnie being here. Phase 1 of the hostage deal was still not completed. That's what they said. And they're right. Egyptian Foreign Minister Badr Abdel Ati met with American envoy Thomas Burke on the sidelines of the Doha Forum. The two discussed recent developments in Syria and strengthening coordination to reduce escalation and stability in the region. Abdel Ati also met with Qatar's Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Mohammed ibn Abdul Rahman Al Thani during the forum. He argued that an international stabilization force should be deployed along the Yellow Line in the Gaza Strip to establish a ceasefire. Iranian authorities have arrested 2 organizers of a marathon held on the Kish Island in the south of the country of Iran, after they allowed women to participate in the competition without wearing hijabs. This was reported by the Iranian news agency Mizan, which is close to the official Iranian government. Nigeria and the authorities in Nigeria successfully released 100 students who were kidnapped about 2 weeks ago from the St. Mary's Catholic School, located in the Niger state in northwest of the country. Local media reported all of this. Last month, it was reported that 215 students and 12 teachers were kidnapped from the school. Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister of Israel, addressed negotiations for a security agreement with Syria and said at a conference of ambassadors and heads of missions of the Foreign Ministry in Jerusalem that we hope to reach an agreement on demilitarization in southern Syria. But we are preserving our assets. Regarding October 7th, he said, one could say that Shinwar fired prematurely. He did not wait and did not coordinate action that was supposed to come simultaneously. Hezbollah on the one side, Iran on the other, a sea of rockets and ballistic missiles shooting against us. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu again said at this very conference at the Foreign Ministry in Jerusalem, he said, Israel today is stronger than ever. Regional and global power. Netanyahu noted that October 7th, Israel suffered a security, economic, and diplomatic attack. There are those who eulogized the state of Israel. But we see that is not the case now. Dozens of IDF soldiers from the Israeli Navy, along with soldiers from the U.S. Fifth Fleet, conducted joint exercises for an entire week. This was reported by the IDF spokesperson, who noted that the purpose of the exercise is to strengthen the strategic and operational cooperation between the two navies and to practice dealing with variations of regional threats. The Director General of the State Controller's Office and Ombudsman, Brigadier General Reserve Ishai Vaknin, has sent an order to 2 former senior officers in the Shin Bet security services, the equivalent of our FBI, to appear for an audit meeting to present relevant documents in their possession in relation to the investigation of the October 7th events. According to the State Controller, the letter was sent to the attorney of the 2 officials after attempts to reschedule meetings with them were unsuccessful. The summons, in accordance with Section 26 of the State Controller's Law, which states failure to appear may result in sanctions. We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one piquante piece of information. This clip is from Dancing with the Stars. It's a Hanukkah dance to Matisyahu's song Miracle, about Hanukkah, obviously, choreographed by Burson. Dancing with the Stars is the most watched reality show in the United States. It's in its 34th season, a Hanukkah dance. Watch and enjoy.
Candles on my vehicle, 8 nights, gonna shine invincible, no longer be divisible, born through the struggle, keep on moving through all this hustle, head up, head down through all of the bustle, New York City wanna flex your muscle, look so down, look so puzzled, huddle around your fire through all the rubble, bound to stumble and fall, but my strength comes not from man at all. Do you believe in miracles? Am I hearing you? So am I seeing you? So ain't nice and ain't lights and these fights keep me right and bless me to the highest heights with your miracle. 8 is the number of infinity, one more than what you know how to be. And this is the light of festivity, when your broken heart yearns to be free.
Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.